to introduce the survivor-centered approach, and very much to introduce you to what we call risk management, which is embedded in the environmental and social framework. So here is the one slide where I'm not going to be spending too much time. What is GBV? We know that GBV is an umbrella term. We know that it happens everywhere in the world, and we know that it happens in the societies and the communities that we are aimed to serve. And we also know that it affects everyone, women, girls, boys, and men, but we also know that it disproportionately affects women and girls. Now, GBV is an umbrella term, and within this umbrella, there's different forms of gender-based violence. For the bank purposes, in terms of safeguard, we will be focusing on 3 types of GBV, which are sexual exploitation, sexual abuse, and sexual harassment. So what do we define as sexual exploitation? So sexual exploitation is defined as any actual or attempted abuse of a position of vulnerability, differential power or trust for sexual purposes. So in the context of the bank, it occurs when project staff, project actors have access or can benefit from some goods, some benefits, some services, and they use their power, whether it's real or perceived, to extract sexual favors, sexual gains from beneficiaries, so populations that we work with, but it can occur, and we'll see that between staff. So maybe this is where I would like to be a bit interactive, bearing this definition in mind and knowing, that the type of interventions and operations that you work on. What do you think could be the risk of sexual exploitation in some of the projects that you're working or that you support? Do you have any examples of how sexual exploitation can occur? Who could be a perpetrator of sexual exploitation? Who could be a survivor or victim of sexual exploitation in your context? I'm not sure I can see the chat, so I'm giving the answers already, but Amy, let me know if there's anything on the chat.
Yes, currently nothing, but as Ida said, please, there's a hand up here. Ulrich?
Yes, Ida. Good afternoon, Ida. And yeah, I will talk for the sake of the SWEAT project, where we really deal with community at the grassroots level, where there is a really, really high contact between project staff in general, NGO staff that we hire, and even social staff that work for the sake of the project that assist the community. And since those communities are very vulnerable, so there can be a lot of blackmail from those communities in order to being selected as the project beneficiary, because it is directly with communities as social protection that is direct with community. So you have a lot of contact between the project intervention, be it the project staff at the PIU level, the NGO staff that are hired by the project, and even the government officials that are there to supervise and always also intervene in the selection of the beneficiary. So there can be a lot of sexual blackmail at that level. And do all these people with power and money, because PIU staff, they have the power, they have the money because they have good salaries. NGO staff, they have the power, they have the money, they have the power because they select beneficiary, and they have money in a very, very remote community where they lack even the minimum. So that is this contact and this asset that these people, that the staff, project staff, the government official, and the NGO that we hire have, they can be the perpetrator of sexual exploitation and abuse on the rural community that we serve.
Thank you. Thanks. I think you've said it all, Ulrich. So thanks so much for this very comprehensive answer. This is exactly it, and this, are some of the examples that we're giving here. So as you say, project actors, and you've defined very well who could be a project actor. It could be a variety of people and of personnel. So it could be, again, demanding sexual favor in exchange to providing cash. So in the context of cash transfer, whether it's for, the being selected or actually providing the service. It can also be, and these are all cases that we unfortunately had to deal with. The health worker refuses to provide services to an LGBTI plus person unless they provide a sexual act, or community member is promised employment in exchange for sex. So again, it's the power that is again perceived or real, because we often have, we can have instances where employment is promised, but the person actually doesn't have the power to materialize that job offer. So it can be very much real or perceived. But all of this, it's using the power in exchange of goods, in exchange of services, in exchange of employment against sexual favor. So here again, the next form of abuse is sexual abuse here. So here again, it's the actual or threatened, and that's very important, threatened physical intrusion of a sexual nature, whether it's by force or again, under unequal or coercive conditions. Again, here it occurs when a project actor uses force or unequal power to perpetrate or threaten to perpetrate an unwanted sexual act. So here again, different example, a community worker sexually assaults a beneficiary. Any sexual relationship with people who are under 18 are considered de facto to be sexual abuse. Or again here, a teacher threatened to disclose a sexual or gender minority student's identity to their family unless they perform sexual favors. Again, unfortunately, these are real examples that we had to deal with. And the last form of GBV that we deal with, particularly in bank finance operation, is sexual harassment. So here, sexual harassment is defined as any sexual advances, requests for sexual favor that might be reasonably perceived as being offensive or humiliating to another. And it's also when such conduct will interfere with work and create a hostile work environment. So maybe in terms of sexual harassment, what I will say is that it's probably one of the form of GBV that we deal with that is probably one of the most difficult one to detect, where the person who received, the comments or the remarks is always thinking, did that really happen? Did I understand that correctly? Am I making a big deal out of something that's not really a big deal? And that's, that's the difficult nature when dealing with sexual harassment. In terms of examples, what I would like to say is that sexual harassment can occur between project staff, just like also a sexual abuse, but it often happens amongst PIU staff, for instance. And it can be, leaving an offensive picture that is of pornographic nature on a colleague's desk, or sending, text messages that are of sexual nature and that are not wanted. Or again, it can be between project actors and beneficiaries. So again, here the example of a teacher, but we have many other examples of project staff that have unacceptable behaviors towards beneficiaries. Again, this can predominantly affect women and girls, but it also affects men and boys. So again, these three types of GBV are the ones that we're going to be focusing when we do risk management, because these are the type of risks that are the most likely to happen when implementing World Bank finance activities. So again, I'm going to go very fast here. Again, we know that the prevalence of GBV is high worldwide. We know that it's happening in our context and in areas where we are going to be intervening. And this is why, as part of the ESF, the environmental and social framework, we have a duty to actively identify, reduce, and mitigate any risks of GBV, in particular risks that are project-induced, such as sexual exploitation, abuse, and sexual harassment. We know that GBV is highly underreported. We know that survivors don't want to come forward, so we need to make sure that we put systems and that we have measures in place that will facilitate the reporting in a safe and confidential manner. So a quick history of the agenda of the World Bank. You know, it goes back almost 8 years ago when we had, you know, one of the first inspection panel in Uganda that was part of that was in the context of a transport project where there were allegations, confirmed allegations of sexual exploitation, abuse of workers against minors. And as a result, the bank, you know, started working on a global GBV action plan, which was drafted in 2017. And a couple of years following this, we had the first good practice note on addressing sexual exploitation, abuse, and sexual harassment, which was published. And these are the two main resources that we use when discussing, when engaging with task teams, but also with clients on how to address risks of sexual exploitation, abuse, and sexual harassment in World Bank finance projects. So for many years, we only had the one dealing with projects that had major civil work. So the first edition was issued in 2018 and the third one in 2022. But thankfully, since 2022, we have now the good practice note that addresses SESH risk management in human development operations, so education, health, and social protection. So these are the two, I always want to say Bible, but it might not be appropriate, but these are the two main resources that we use when, again, you know, engaging conversation. So again, you know, I'll be sharing the links. And if you haven't yet been able to see or to consult those documents, I would really encourage you to do so. They're really well written and they're very comprehensive as well. So generally, at the bank, we very much are aligned with international standards and ensure that all our actions are aligned with the survivor-centered approach, which in a nutshell is composed of 6 major principles. And so this survivor-centered approach is something that we aim to implement in every activity that we do that is related to risk management, whether it's identification of risk, whether it's incident response, whether it's assessment, whether it's consultation with communities and developing communication material. Everything has to be, you know, aligned with this survivor-centered approach. And so in terms of principles, the first one is to ensure that we can enable the access to quality GBV services. And at a minimum, we need to ensure that we can provide access to health, psychological, and legal services. And I'll come back to that in a second. The safety of the survivor is always paramount. And we need to make sure that we never compromise, you know, the physical and emotional safety of the survivor through our actions and intervention. Informed consent as well is a key principle. So we need to make sure that we always obtain the informed consent of the survivor. And this becomes particularly relevant in the context of incident response. So when we deal with an incident, do we have the survivor's consent to register the the complaint in the grievance mechanism? Do we have their consent to go forward? Do we have their consent to refer them to services? So again, you know, ensuring that we obtain that consent is paramount, because again, you know, it's ensuring that we limit the risk of doing harm. Confidentiality. So again, you know, ensure that we do not disclose any information without having obtained the informed consent. Ensure so that we share information or data that it is anonymized, that is not identifiable, and that we again respect any data sharing protocol. Respect. So again, you know, here linked with the principle of self-determination, all our actions and interventions need to be guided by the respect of the survivor's rights and choices. You know, if they, for instance, decide not to be referred to GBV services, we might have a different opinion, but we need to respect that. And we need to ensure that survivors know that they are in control of what happens. And again, you know, the principle of non-discrimination, ensuring that all survivors of GBV have and receive equal and fair treatments, regardless of different criteria. So I'm sure that you're all very familiar with that, but again, you know, it's not only an approach that we have when we respond to an incident, when we respond to a case, but it is, you know, a principle that we try to streamline across all our interventions and actions. Okay, I'm just going to go very quickly on that. The good practice note, particularly the new HD1, places a focus on the different groups that are at risk. You know, referring to LGBT, QI+, to individuals with vulnerability. The third edition of the Good Practice Note on civil work has a whole section on children, because unfortunately, a lot of the incidents that we respond to involved children, and in particularly girls who are sexually exploited. So here, you know, we really have an emphasis on what are the groups at risks, and what are the approach that we need to take to ensure that we do not harm them when responding to their needs, or when, for instance, consulting them. So again, you know, there's a lot of guidance in the Good Practice Note in how to ensure that we conduct consultation with women and girls in a way that is ethical, and that again respects, you know, their needs and their rights. And this is also because I often review a lot of communication material that are developed by project, and often, you know, some of the visuals that are developed by project, you know, can go against this survivor-centered approach, in the sense that, you know, they represent images or illustrations where women are abused, or in position of, you know, of survivor. Women are not shown as in a position of empowerment, or men are always represented in a role of abusers. So, you know, again, it's breaking those cycles and showing, you know, positive images of what we want survivors to do. So, for instance, knowing where they can access services, and what are the behaviors that we want to encourage. How am I doing in terms of time, Aimee? Am I ready?
Yes, I was just gonna say we have 10 minutes. Is that okay for you?
Yeah. No, I'm just gonna
right.
I'm just gonna go fast forward. You're gonna have all that material, and I'm sure that you're very familiar with that. I just want to maybe two things to say that SESH risk management, you know, is relevant throughout the project cycle. So it's not something that we only do at preparation. It's not something that we only do at implementation, but it's something that, you know, happens throughout preparation, decision making, negotiation, effectiveness, and implementation. Now, at this stage of maybe 3 to 4 years of, you know, supporting clients to prepare GBV action plans, to ensure that, you know, they're fine-tune some of the mitigating strategies, we are trying to put a focus on the implementation on what works and what doesn't work. We're trying to put an emphasis on how can we streamline some of those mitigating measures that I'll be presenting in a minute, and how do we monitor adequately those mitigating measures. Okay. So I don't know if many of you are familiar, but the bank has a screening tool that can be accessed internally here. I've put the link. And so we have a screening tool specifically for the education sector, one for the social protection sector, one for the health sector, and also one for projects with major civil work. And it's basically, 25 indicators at national, but also at project level that can increase the risk of sexual exploitation and sexual abuse. So this is something that we use as soon as we know that, we have, for instance, a PCN, so at concept level. And again, this is a starting point. This is a discussion opener. It provides a risk level, from low to high risk. And this will also determine the level of mitigating measures that we will recommend for projects to put in place. Again, what I would like to say is that this is a discussion opener and it needs to be supplemented by other risk assessment. It's not by no means an assessment, but it's a screening tool, and it needs to be completed by a bank, by client-led social assessment. So here you have more information on what a client-led SESH risk assessment should entail and should look like. And here again, more information on how do we determine SESH risk categories. So again, we look at the contextual risk, the project-related risk, but also the client capacity. So here I just because I'm running out of time, I just wanted to give you a snapshot, an overview of what are the mitigating measures that we suggest for projects, and what is the proportional approach to SESH risk management. So here you have, in a nutshell, the minimum actions required. So we do ask for certain risk levels for projects to draft a GBV action plan. So this is very much a roadmap. It's not a mitigating measure in itself, but it's a document that will enable the client to have an understanding of what are the risks, what are the mitigating measures, how can they be contextualized, and how can they be monitored. Code of conducts, and accountability and response framework. Ensuring that grievance mechanisms are adapted to responding and dealing with sensitive complaints such as SESH, the mapping of GBV services, and the monitoring of the whole action plan. So here, I think it's a very good visual, because it provides you with an overview of the different mitigating measures according to the risks level. So again, here, hence the importance to assess the risk, because again, we're not going to be asking every project to implement the same level of mitigating measures. But here, as you can see, we have 4 risk levels, so low, moderate, substantial, and high. And according to that, we'll ask projects to consider and to contextualize some of the mitigating measures. So for all projects, we'll be asking them at a minimum to have the 5 mitigating measures, which are to ensure that the PAU or the implementing agency is aware of what could be SESH risks that are exacerbated by the implementation of their activities, and what will the project do about it. The need to map SESH risk, but also to map service providers. And you see that this is mitigating measures that we ask for all risk level, because all projects, no matter of the risk level, needs to be able to refer in a timely manner survivors of GBV and SESH to local service providers. Community awareness as a third category. Code of conducts, and we'll see it's slightly different for HD programs, and also training of trainers, of workers, sorry. Number 5 is the GM, and ensuring, that we have specific pathways for SESH complaints, for receiving them, for treating them, for conducting investigation, and for monitoring them. The GBV action plan is asked or required from the moderate risk level. From the substantial, we ask the PIU to consider recruiting a GBV specialist, and also, you know, to reflect on how are they going to be implementing this action plan. So who could be contracted in order, you know, to conduct all the awareness raising, the monitoring, the operationalizing the GM. And from the high risk level, then, you know, we ask for third-party monitoring to be recruited, so some kind of auditing of the GBV action plan. And we ask also when there is a whenever there are gaps that have been identified through the service mapping, that they should be filling those gaps by providing either training, equipment, or transport. And this is very much for high risk level projects. I'll finish with this slide, Aimée.
Thank you.
So maybe here in terms of HD, so it's slightly different in terms of, you know, the mitigating measures and the proportionality. So for low and moderate SESH risk level, we ask for a code of conduct or behavioral standard with generic language for all project actors. And this is maybe something that is often problematic for HD projects, is because you work often, you know, with civil servants, whether it's in the health sector, the education sector, that might have signed already, you know, a sectoral code of conduct or behavioral standards that kind of has very vague language on what are the acceptable and unacceptable behaviors. And often when those are deemed to be not sufficient, we ask for those civil servant to sign a code of conduct that specifically prohibits acts of sexual exploitation, abuse, and sexual harassment. And often those civil servants are very reluctant to sign those code of conducts, but it's possible. We've done it with education project in both the DRC and Niger. And so if you want more information, or if you want, you know, to discuss that, we have some very good lessons learned from those contexts and operations. Again, here, you know, sensitizations of communities and workers on what are the risks of SESH, an effective grievance mechanism with SESH referral pathways. Just trying to think, and maybe what's different here again is we for projects that have a substantial or high risk level, we will ask for GBV specialists to be recruited as part of the PIU. We will ask for the identification or the mapping of holistic quality GBV services, and for an action plan to be drafted. So as I'm sure you can see, and I'll finish with that, there are a lot of synergies and pathways that are offered for collaborations and kind of scaling up some of those measures as part of HD projects. You know, I've been working with the SWEAT project, and, you know, we've been discussing, for instance, conducting the GBV mapping. You know, how can we scale up some of all the work that's been done on social norms and behavioral change? Grievance mechanism is also another one that's that has a great opportunity for scaling up. So here, you know, we're trying to do a bit more than safeguard, and particularly with HD project, to see how can we also do a bit of system strengthening, you know, particularly within the health and the education sector, that would go beyond a project's life and a project duration, and that would very much contribute to strengthening the overall GBV prevention and response system. So the presentation goes on. It provides more details on each mitigating measures. I'm here to answer any questions, but I would like to suggest for you to have a look at the wording and the guidance on the code of conduct and the behavioral standard, on the accountability and response framework, and on all the work that we're doing on GBV mapping, which at the moment is ongoing, for instance, in Mauritania and in Guinea with the SWEAT team more specifically. Voilà. I'm gonna
Thank
stop
you.
there.
Thank you so much, Aida, for this wonderful and also very important presentation. Obviously, these moments are not never enough. I'm sure you have much more to share with us, but we're already really grateful that you took the time to share this with us. So I'm going to open the floor. As Aida said, obviously the PowerPoint will be available to you, and also this recording, but I would like to take the time as well for you if you have any questions, remarks, reflections, anything that came up that you would like to discuss right now. I'm sure you would also be available afterwards for any questions, if there's anything not clear or any additional questions, but I think we can take this opportunity while we have Aida in our presence. So if there's anyone right now. Ulrich, yes. Is that an old hand or is it a new hand?
No, it's a new hand.
Okay, go ahead.
Okay, thank you, Aida, once more for your presentation. And I think you have been clear for on so many points, and we have had the opportunity to discuss some of those issues during the last mission of SWED in Cameroon and in Chad. So I will just have a question concerning how to address this GBV issue, because we have some constraints regarding the how can I say it, as the recruitment of GBV specialists and safeguard specialists globally in the project team, because given the ratio of the project management budget, it often comes that the safeguard team seems to be very overloaded within project, while PIU often found that maybe they are restrained in recruiting another technical staff in the profit of some safeguard team staff, including GBV actors, and that really overload their operational budget, their budget. So it makes them to have a higher. So, given that, can it be another mechanism, because we even thought of a mechanism of contracting consultant. You talked about third-party monitoring, but that is consultant that will not always be a PIU staff in a sort of way to lighten the human resource load. Because for instance, in the SWED chart, for instance, we have 14 people in the PIU, but out of these 14 people, we have 3 or 4 that are only for safeguard, environmental specialists and social safeguard specialists and a GBV specialist. So how it comes? Is it very mandatory, or we cannot find a way to have all these positions merged into, let's say, 1 or 2 positions in order to lighten the staffing in the PIU? Thank you.
Thank you, Ulrich. I'll take another question now from Charlotte or Aline, one of the since here together.
Yes, thank you, Aimee. Aida, thank you for your presentation. My question is on the training. You know, because I see that there are a lot of information, and I'm wondering, how do you process, you know, once a project starts, do we have to train all the project team? How does it work so that people are aware of this particular component of SCA, or there is no training and you just have to focus on the person who is going to be hired as the specialist? But the problem that I've often seen is that the GBV specialists, usually it's hired 6 months after the project starts. So my question is, you know, what is your recommendation, particularly in terms of hiring, as Ulrich said, but particularly on training, capacity building right from the start? What is on the schedule? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Aline. Oh, sorry, I'm losing my voice a little bit here. So, Aida, I'm going to take another question. Is it okay if we to take a few questions? Okay, Zainabou, floor is yours.
Thank you, Emir. Thank you, Ida, for this presentation, useful presentation. So I have a question regarding the SWEAT project. As you may know, we do have an indicator related to the GBV survivor who have received at least one service: health, psychosocial, legal, security, economic, from an organization supported by the project. And the description of this indicator is that these are the proportion of GBV survivors or victims who have benefited from at least one care services out of all the cases identified in the structures supported by the project. And this structure include the call center or any other existing platform. So my question is, when a survivor call at the call centers, can we consider that these survivors have benefited from a care service? Given that when you call in the call center, people may give you an information on how you can have information on how you can get access to psychological or emotional violence. And if it is the case in countries where we do have just call centers, can we consider that 100% of people who call, who use this call center are really benefited from this care service? So that's all. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Zainabou. I think we can take the last question from Edith, and I'll give then back the floor to Aida. Edith?
Thank you very much, Aida, for the presentation. The information you gave was right up my street because I have been on the implementation side and now I'm on this side. And maybe one of the things I wanted, I don't know if the bank has a system for that, has been the procurement. I want to add my voice into what Ulrich said. The procurement in projects often puts very little money on environmental and social issues. And because of that, GBV is under the social issues. So you find the environmental and social safeguards team are recruited for maybe a couple of days in a year on the project. And because of that, they can't be there every day. And yet social issues happen every day on a project. As a result, you find the things that they are missing on the project. And by the time they get to know, the things have escalated. So I don't know if the bank has a threshold where they say for all contract documents, this specific amount is fair enough for every contractor to put as what is going to work on social issues and environmental issues so that they have a budget. Even when you go to supervise projects, you find the E&S team don't have a car, don't have money for operational costs. As a result, they can't go to the field, but most of the issues are happening in the field. And so their hands are tied, they can't do this work. Another thing that also I noticed as I kept doing this work, I come from the road sector. So I used to be a resettlement specialist. And one of the things is that the requirements are supposed to provide a safeguard for women and girls. But then the downside to that is that it caused contractors to be scared to recruit women because there are so many rules. You have to have GBV policy, you have to have this and this. So it made the contractors nervous about recruiting women. Now already the infrastructure sector is one that is very male dominated. So I don't know how we can strike a balance between making it easy to recruit the women, providing a protected environment for them, safeguarding them, while also not making it difficult for them to be recruited at the same time. So you find most of them are doing these low-cadre jobs. They're doing cleaning and cooking, and that's where they're most vulnerable to be sexually abused, instead of getting jobs like supervisors or operators, technical jobs. So one of the things we used to do is we'd force the contractors to train the women and say, train these women so that they have an opportunity to grow into the ranks and get jobs that are better for them. But this is a very timely training, and this is information that we could have benefited from. I was on that project that had the inspection panel. So I remember the nightmare that it was. We slept in the field, trying to sensitize the communities, trying to investigate and all that and all that. So I understand the pain. But as donors, how is the World Bank handling the weak systems also in the countries? Because that's another angle that's difficult. The weak systems make it difficult to get the perpetrators and to get justice. For example, there's a dam, a bridge that we used to work on and supervise, that had Chinese contractors, workers interfacing with the communities. So we had so many Chinese Ugandan babies that were produced on that project. But the penalty usually was that you deport the Chinese contractor. Whereas that produced some justice, it didn't solve the problem, because you now left behind a single mother to take care of this baby by herself. So sometimes the penalties that we give the contractors aren't necessarily solving the problem. So these are things we also need to look at. Thank you, and over to you. Back to you, Amy.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Edith, and for all your questions. Aida, I will give it over back to you. Many questions, issues about the recruitment as we see for GBV specialists, the training part as well, how training the project team. Are survivors really benefiting from the services? And obviously all these questions as well, once again, on the issues of recruitment, the procurement, the little money that is available for social issues, and how are World Bank or donors really treating the weak systems in terms of also perpetrators. So over to you, Aida.
Thanks, Amy, and thanks everybody for those great questions. So I'll attempt in responding as much as I can. So starting with the first question of Ulrich, and I think Edith had also some concerns on the procurement side, on the fact that often, you know, environmental and social safeguard in particular are very much underfunded. So I completely agree with you. And this is why, you know, we often advocate during project preparation for some of these positions to feature in the environmental and social commitment plan, you know, so that we don't have any surprises at a later stage. But I agree with you, you know, this all, and it's like the GBV action plan, it needs to be funded. And that's why when we review GBV action plan, we often have, you know, projects who don't either add a column on the budget or who are very vague on the budget, you know, and we often come back to them and they say, we need to have, you know, more details included on the budget, because we know how problematic it can be, you know, to fund those activities. So, you know, this is all, you know, part of a broader exercise of budgeting and, you know, a lot of issues on budgeting, you know, social safeguard issues. You know, we in some countries, we have discussions with the country management and with the coordination, because, you know, even within PIUs, there's often, you know, there can be issues with coordinators who don't take social safeguard seriously. So this is, you know, an ongoing work, an advocacy work, a negotiation work, but ultimately, you know, these need to be reflected in the ESCP, the Environmental and Social Commitment Plan. They need to be budgeted, and they need to be budgeted in the annual budget. You know, the PTBA in French. I don't know what's but the annual budget of a project. You know, that's key. Ulrich, on your question on, you know, whether do we actually really need a position for a GBV specialist and can it not be merged? So I would say that, again, you know, we're not saying that all projects need to have a GBV specialist. You know, it's a proportional approach. It depends on the risks level. And often what I've seen, and particularly for projects like SWED, I've seen, you know, SWED projects like the SWED 1 or SWED 2 that was working without a social safeguard because they were not prepared on the ESF, or whether the social safeguard was also working on GBV issues. and that became, highly problematic. I'm being sent a lot of documents from a project that go beyond safeguard, a lot of documents that are related to project component on how to implement, a specific component on GBV, how, to monitor the indicators. If you do not have a GBV specialist, and I've seen it, I've seen the reality of it, it has become, and it was extremely difficult for the project to monitor the implementation and to implement effectively those projects. So I say for a project like SWED, beyond having a GBV specialist that does the safeguards, I think it totally makes sense to have someone who has some understanding on gender and GBV. And I think that this is the case, at least for the SWED Plus. Again, I've seen, and not referring specifically to SWED here, but I've seen projects, with substantial or high risk where, there was so much negotiation on the GBV specialist, they ended up not being recruited. The social safeguard specialist, was doing their best, but in the end, did a lot of harm when they were dealing with incident response because they did not have, sufficient expertise and knowledge on how to deal adequately with this kind of incident. So I think there's a risk of doing more harm, especially for substantial and high risk projects when you don't have that expertise in place. Having said that, we are always open to have a conversation on seeing, in some contexts, we had GBV specialists sharing their time between 2 different projects. We've had, GBV specialists who are recruited as consultants, for a certain period of time. So we can be flexible and we can have those discussions, but for a project like SWED, I think it is critical to have someone who has that expertise. In terms of training, so how does the capacity training work? Was a question of, sorry, I can see Charlotte, but I'm not sure who is the colleague next to Charlotte. So no, that's a great point, and you're right. Often, GBV specialists, Alina.
Aline, yes.
Aline, okay, Aline. So often GBV, and you're very generous when you're saying that GBV specialists are recruited 6 months, because sometimes they're recruited much later than that. So training happens, like when the GBV specialist is recruited on the project, I work with a team of GBV expert STCs, and we're always there, to provide a kind of inception a meeting, une réunion de cadrage with those specialists to train them. And also that the capacity building and the mentoring, goes, throughout the project. So, it's having dedicated training, but also, the mentoring happens, throughout a period of time. But the GBV specialist then is in charge of ensuring that the PIU and that the different contractors and implementing partners are capacitated, have an understanding of what are the risks. And again, we have material that we often provide to those experts to do the training. Again, depending on how the project is, depending on the sector, depending on the activities, NGOs and GBV NGOs often play a critical role in raising awareness and in training workers on site. And for transport projects, for instance, we often have GBV NGOs that do all this capacity for all the contractors and the workers that are on the different sites. So on Seinabu's questions on indicator, Seinabu, I'm happy to have a bit more of a reflection with you, but my first thought is if the hotline is there to respond to the call and then to provide information as to where services can be found, so like to make a referral on behalf of the GBV survivor, I'm not sure that this can be counted as a GBV survivor as having access services, unless the hotline and the agents of the hotlines are trained on providing psychosocial support. So then yes, some kind of support has been provided. But if the hotline is only there, to somehow receives the call and then provides information as to where to find services or to establish contact between the survivor and the service, then I'm not sure this can qualify as having access services. But I'm happy to brainstorm more on that. Josephine, I don't know if you have any thoughts on that. And maybe on the on Edith's last question, I think Edith, I agree on everything that you said. I think that often, you know, recruiting female staff at, you know, higher position is also a great way to address GBV and to address, you know, sexual harassment in the workplace. And again, you know, this is a commitment that a project can make by having specific indicators onto how many, you know, women or female workers are recruited. So again, you know, this can be linked to the project outcome indicators. And on your last question, which is a massive question on how the bank addresses a weak system, I think that's where I was trying to conclude on, is that we need to go beyond safeguard and reflect on how we can also strengthen system. So, you know, that it's looking at the policy framework and the legal framework. So, you know, and I think that Josephine has, you know, a lot to say on that. You know, in Togo, there's been amazing work done on, you know, ensuring that the institutional framework was reinforced by the drafting of a intersectoral referral protocol, by ensuring, for instance, that we have sectoral code of conducts for certain civil servants that are enforced, that prohibits sexual harassment, ensuring that we do a lot of work on the provision of GBV services, so training health workers on the clinical management of rape. So this is something that health projects do. So yes, we can go beyond a safeguard, and this is something that the bank is definitely aiming at, and this is something that is quite central in the bank's new gender policy. You know, in terms of eradicating GBV, it features quite predominantly in the new gender strategy. There we go. I tried to address all the questions. I hope I did.
Absolutely. Right on time as well, because our time is running out. But
Yeah.
Thank you so much. Please help me in thanking Aida Diop once again for her presence and being here today with us. You can give us a virtual warm round of applause. Josephine, I see your hand is up. You would like to come in? Okay.
Yes, I'll do it in 1 minute. Just to say huge thanks to Aida, and just to emphasize how valuable it is for our fellows to work together with their SSI colleagues on this agenda. I was really thrilled when Aida concluded her presentation today by emphasizing it's not just about compliance. We really want to build capacity in our countries to own this agenda and to be able to carry this forward themselves, right? We want them to work on strengthening their GBV services. We want them to work on improving their policies. It's not just about risk-proofing our own projects. And SSI can't do this alone. HD is not mandated to do this alone. So let's join hands and please, throughout all your projects and your initiatives, try to build on the strong expertise of SSI colleagues in this matter and try to take it a bit further. Let me end with that, Amy. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Well, thank you once again, Aida. I know we had another item on our agenda, but we'll make sure that we plan in and schedule in another moment for that. So we will have more time for your questions as well. So for those who were not here, Charles and Josephine will share some feedback from project managers on, you know, the Fellows program, and will be really of interest for you in terms of your work, the coming months, reporting lines and career prospects and so on. So we'll make sure that we schedule in another moment for that. And with that, thank you so much. I thank you once again, Aida Diop. The PowerPoint presentation will be available, the recording as well. And I'll wish you all a very, very wonderful rest of your day. And I'll see you next time. Thank you so much. Take care. And if you want, you can open your cameras or even your microphones to say goodbye to everyone.
Thank you, everybody.
Bye. Thank you.
Colleagues, and stay tuned for next session with feedback from the PMs on the Fellows program.
Yes, definitely. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Aida.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you, Aida. Thank you. Bye-bye.